Coming up on Network Africa. Sudan Army and rival Rapid Support Forces agreed to 5-day ceasefire extension. Dozens of babies die in orphanage as Sudan's war takes grim toll on capital Khartoum. Plus, dozens of protesters clash with police over opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. We begin in Sudan, where warring sides have agreed to extend a shaky ceasefire after coming under pressure from mediators. The 5-day truce extension between Sudan's military and its rival, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, was announced in a joint statement by Saudi Arabia and the United States. On the last day of the old ceasefire, clashes rocked the capital Khartoum. Both sides had used the last 7 days to resupply and reinforce their positions in anticipation of new fighting. The fighting has killed at least 866 civilians and wounded thousands more. In the meantime, the United States and Saudi Arabia have welcomed the extension of the ceasefire deal between Sudan's warring military factions for another 5 days. Washington and Riyadh announced the latest deal as well as brokering the previous week-long truce. In a joint statement, they acknowledged that the ceasefire had not been fully observed, but said it had allowed the delivery of aid to 2 million people in Sudan. The UN World Food Programme said the relative lull in fighting had allowed it to send supplies to residents trapped in Khartoum for the first time since fighting erupted 6 weeks ago. Well, earlier on, Sudanese residents were expressing concerns that continued intense fighting would shatter the slim hopes raised by a prolonged ceasefire agreed by the warring parties. Starting from Sunday, clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces again broke out in Khartoum as well as Omdurman, shattering the fragile 7-day ceasefire they agreed to on May the 20th, which was aimed for the delivery of assistance and conditions for lasting peace. Meanwhile, residents expressed their hope for peace and stability as the war would only make the country exhausted.
Between the RSF and the SAF in North Bahri and here in North Omdurman, the army have used its heavy artillery in order to target the locations of RSF in North Bahri. There was also clashes in western and south Omdurman between both forces. Citizens there that I have spoken with reported hearing of sounds of gunfire and also sounds of shells from yesterday night until the early morning around the engineering corps in western Omdurman city.
In the meantime, Sudanese residents in and around the national capital are torn between staying or fleeing their homes as the conflict between the country's two rival military factions drag on for more than 40 days. Since the clashes between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces broke out, Sudan's tri-capital area comprised of Khartoum, the capital, its neighboring cities of Bahri and Omdurman have seen the fiercest fighting. The 6 million plus people living in the area are facing a short supply of life's necessities and frequent power and water outages. Many are facing the tough choice between staying put or embarking on a dangerous and expensive journey to flee. Zainab El Hag Ibrahim, a 50-year-old lawyer who originally lived in Khartoum North, has seen her neighborhood under heavy shelling since the conflict started. Many nearby houses have been destroyed. To escape the fighting, Ibrahim and her husband fled to Khartoum to live with her brother, only to find that it is not safe there either. The exchange of gunfire in the capital city almost never ceases. Warplanes frequently fly over their rooftop, and the sound of explosions and gunfire continues to ring out. Apart from safety risks, rising prices, limited access to daily necessities, and they've made life increasingly difficult in the tri-capital area. And in the days after war erupted in Khartoum, Dr. Abir Abdullah rushed between rooms at Sudan's largest orphanage, trying to care for hundreds of babies and toddlers as the fighting kept all but a handful of staff away. And then came waves of deaths. There were the infants housed on the upper floors of the state-run orphanage known as Maigoma, according to the doctor, without enough staff to care for them. Excuse me. They succumbed to severe malnutrition as well as dehydration. 8 other people who have either visited the orphanage since the war began or have been in touch with other visitors say conditions have deteriorated badly and deaths have spiked.
This is the call of help, humanity, peace and hope. Hope for normal and a better life for the orphans who are trapped in Khartoum because of the war and truth violation. I'm standing here in this situation for the second time, calling your conscience and compassion to save more than 300 children, their age between days and years, suffering every day from lack of feeding, supplement, proper medical care and mental health support. Sadly, I witnessed most of their deaths and funerals. So our message to the world, evacuate the orphans from Khartoum to a safe city with a safe pathway.
Well, estimates that about 1 million people might flee Sudan by October may be conservative, and conflict in the area increases the risk of people trafficking and spreading weapons across a fragile region. Well, this according to the head of the UN Refugee Agency, who adds that more than 350,000 people have already fled across Sudan's borders since the war began, with most heading to Egypt, Chad and South Sudan.
We're operating on a 6-month plan, which goes until, therefore, September, October, which foresees about 1 million people leaving the country, 800,000 Sudanese and 200,000 other nationalities that live in Sudan. But in a relatively short period of time, we have reached already in excess of 350,000. Doesn't seem to stop. This projection that in the next few months we'll reach these high figures may even be conservative at this point. At the beginning, I didn't believe it would be, but now I'm beginning to be worried. The collapse of law and order inside a big country will be the perfect fertile ground for human trafficking, which is already quite thriving in the east of the country, as we know very well. And now, with a lot of people desperate to move on, this will be very, very much a risk to be reckoned with. But not, as always, please, let's close all our borders. That's not the response, but addressing the causes of that. And finally, and this is not my expertise, but I think it's to be kept in mind, is the possibility that all the weapons that are now being circulating, spread out in fragile countries. We've seen it in Libya with the Sahel. We don't want a repeat of that, because that will be a multiplier of crisis and of humanitarian problems. Sicurezza molto forte.
Well, let's now speak with VOA Africa correspondent in Nairobi, Kenya, Mohammed Yusuf. Hi, Mohammed, it's good to see you. Talk to us about the latest, what they're calling, that's the warring parties now, an extra 5-day truce. What does it say about the state of their minds at this time?
Both parties have agreed to extend another 5 days to the ceasefire. There's an agreement to that after a 7-day ceasefire. The whole idea is this: I think the people who are pushing these talks and ceasefire, they're trying to at least, they seem to understand the suffering of the people. They're having the people there at the back of their mind. But we have seen also 7-day ceasefire, another 5 days now extension. We quite understand now that both parties are not respecting the ceasefire. The fighting has been going on, but people are not losing hope. They keep on pushing, even though they know that the ceasefire, no one respects the ceasefire, is not holding, the fighting continues. But they have the people at the back of their mind to make sure that these people, they're able to get help and to receive humanitarian assistance. And for those who are trying to at least able to get out, that is what has been looking at the back of the mind. People are pushing it, at least for the people who care so much. But for the people also on the ground, the fighters, the warring parties, the Sudanese National Army and the RSF, the paramilitary, it's also a time when they have a ceasefire. It's also a time for them to re-strategize, to deploy more, and also to, if their forces, to get treatment if it is available. It's also time for them to rethink their strategy. It gives them that time for them to continue with the fighting. But on the perspective of people, general public, this is a ceasefire they need. They know that it's not holding, but at least they're able to move around, and those who are able to get out, they can get out. And aid seems to be going in now in some parts of Sudan, particularly Khartoum.
But it's really unbelievable, especially to those who feel that, these people definitely do not have the people in their minds. The warring parties are continuing, and you said, going to prepare to stock up and get ready to continue the fighting. I mean, when there is this discussion and there is this ceasefire, what do they hope to achieve? Is it just a window, a day or two, or 5 or 7 days for humanitarian access, for health, for medicine, which even the fighters also need? Aren't they looking at a permanent solution to this problem, the issues?
The question sometimes people tend to ask is, an African country, how long can you fight? It's just now since mid-April, and how long can we continue to fight? Of course, our economy is not that big in many African countries, and many African countries cannot sustain war quite long. But at times, what you start, at times, what drives it may be very different. And now is a very dangerous situation. If you're going to have ceasefire, you're also going to create more people, more ammunitions moving in, more troops moving in. That is a possibility. There's also a possibility, of course, many people are not giving hope, to make sure that at least there is law and order, that Sudan does not disintegrate beyond this. If it goes beyond this, we all know it's very dangerous. In a country like Sudan, many African places, there are tribes, there are many issues around, there are grievances, there are historical injustices, and the country like Sudan, since independence, there have been many issues to do with the lack of accountability. There's been fighting around. We know ICC with al-Bashir fighting in Darfur, and all those kind of things we've seen. No one is able, no one has been accountable for all this violence. Is this going to be another part of that conflict, part of that history in Sudan? If is going to remain like this. I think that it seems many people not to care much about that. But at the moment, as it stands, it's just to make sure that at least people are able to get help, to get humanitarian supplies. That is all they're looking for. But generally, historically, Sudan, with all the fighting, violence we've seen in the region, there has been not much accountability, and it has always gone. But will this time be different? Will those people who are responsible be judged and be brought to book, face justice? Time will tell. But as it is now, the talk still goes on, and no one seems to be giving up.
Indeed. Another question, Mohammed, as well, is that will they be willing to extend the ceasefire? Because is 5 days enough at this time when we look at the humanitarian needs of the people? And we earlier spoke about Zainab Ibrahim, a 50-year-old lawyer who had to move from the capital's north to a more central area, but then that isn't safe. Where is safe in Sudan?
It appears the only safe place now for is a countryside. Of course, it's also spreading as weeks, days, months goes on. But many people are now crossing over to neighboring countries. That is what is happening. But whether it's going to be an extension, we suspect there's going to be extension. There's been no consequence after 7 days of ceasefire. The fighting has always gone on, and now 5 days, nothing is going to change. The fighting will still go on. If they're going to extend another 2, 3, 4, 5 week or 2 weeks, then there's no questions on what is happening on the ground, and no one is answering those questions. They're not answerable to anyone. It's just a matter of agreeing on paper a ceasefire, but that is what is happening. But on the positive side also, despite all the fighting and conflict, we've seen aid going in, and at least some people are able to receive up. The UN food program, for the first time on Saturday, they were able to distribute aid supplies, and that is it hasn't been happening, and that is on the positive side. Is this something that now you have to find the balance? The fighting will go on; these guys will continue to fight, but also you need to save people and to make sure people are safe and be able to get out of the country if possible. Of those who are not capable of doing it, at least they go to a countryside where they're able to get humanitarian assistance. They feel more safer.
Mohammed, thank you. We continue to watch the developments. VOA's correspondent, the Africa correspondent, Nairobi, Kenya, Mohammed Yusuf. Still to come on the program. Kremlin gives assurance Russia will engage at proper levels during BRICS summit. We have details in a moment. Welcome back. Dozens of protesters clashed with police in Senegal's capital, Dakar, after lawmakers were blocked from visiting the home of a prominent opposition politician, Ousmane Sonko, on trial for separate charges of rape and libel. Police fired tear gas at groups of demonstrators who built makeshift barricades along one of Dakar's main highways. In one neighborhood, cars were gutted by fire and a ministerial building set aflame. It is the latest round of months of unrest triggered by President Macky Sall's refusal to rule out running for a third term. The opposition is also protesting court cases involving Mr. Sonko, who denies wrongdoing and says the charges are aimed at excluding him from running for president next February. A Libyan court has condemned 35 jihadists to death. They were convicted of fighting with the Islamic State group in the North African country during chaos that followed Muammar Gaddafi's fall. This is the first group of 320 alleged jihadists to be tried and sentenced. 13 others were were sentenced to life in prison after the trial that began last August in the western city of Misrata. The accused are the Palestinian, Sudanese and Libyan extraction. All had been in custody since December 2016 and were convicted of joining a terrorist group as well as murder. Some others were acquitted, but exactly how many is not clear. In addition, the court sentenced 3 minors to 10 years in prison each. Libya was plunged into more than a decade of chaos and lawlessness following the 2011 NATO-backed uprising that led to the removal and killing of Gaddafi. South Africa's foreign minister has granted diplomatic immunity to foreign officials attending the BRICS summit in August and a meeting for BRICS foreign ministers this week. The BRICS alliance represents some of the world's leading emerging economies and including Russia, China, Brazil, as well as India. Now, there are speculations that this could potentially open the door for Vladimir Putin to attend the August gathering in South Africa. But South Africa's spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Clayson Monyela, tweeted that such immunities were standard when a country hosts an international conference or summit. The International Criminal Court, ICC, issued an arrest warrant in March for the Russian president for alleged war crimes in Ukraine. As a signatory to the ICC's Rome Statute, South Africa is expected to enforce the warrant and arrest Mr. Putin. South Africa previously failed to act on its legal obligation to the ICC when in 2015, Sudan's then leader, Omar al-Bashir, visited during Jacob Zuma's presidency, but was not arrested. A Kremlin spokesman says Russia will take part in the BRICS summit in South Africa at the proper level. The Russian president was invited to the gathering earlier this year, but a warrant subsequently issued by the ICC means South Africa would be expected to arrest him if he attends. The spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, is quoted as saying, Russia attaches enormous importance to the development of this format of integration. The United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS peacekeepers, government officials, humanitarians, diplomatic partners, community members came together in the country's capital, Juba, to celebrate International Peacekeeping Day. At the event, the Secretary General's Special Representative and head of the UN peacekeeping mission on the ground, Nicholas Haysom, urged peacekeepers to build enduring partnerships with local communities as well as authorities. The top UN official, accompanied by South Sudan's acting Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Deng Dao Deng, inspected an honor guard by peacekeepers from China, Nepal, Bangladesh, India and Rwanda, and a mixed group of countries representing the United Nations Police. This year's commemoration was doubly significant as the UN marks 75 years of peacekeeping operations. And back here in Nigeria, the Lagos state government has flagged off the construction of a state-of-the-art edifice that will house the proposed Lagos State Infectious Disease Research Institute within the premises of the mainland hospital Yaba. Governor Sanwo-Olu, who was represented by the Commissioner for Transportation, says the development of the institute, which he termed critical medical infrastructure, will go a long way in ensuring rapid response and diagnosis to emergent pathogens, especially at the beginning of an outbreak when quarantine, treatment and other public health measures are most effective.
The proposed construction of the Lagos State Infectious Disease Research Institute is located within the premises of the Mainland Hospital Yaba, also known as Infectious Disease Hospital. Medical experts in various fields and other concerned partners are gathered at the Mainland Hospital for the groundbreaking ceremony. The hospital, which has been in existence for over 7 decades, is due for a research institute facility, especially during an outbreak of diseases.
This research institute that we are going to have, that we are doing the foundation laying ceremony today, is part of what the government has planned for this institution, so that we'll be better prepared for any future outbreak of any infectious diseases that might occur in the state. And we know that about 2-3 days ago, the WHO actually said that something big is coming. We don't know when it's going to be. Our prayers is that that prediction will not come to be, but we know that we need to be prepared.
Lagos is planning ahead of any eventuality in order to protect its residents.
If you recall, when COVID first started, one of the first things we had to do was to sequence the genome of the organism to know exactly what kind of organism it was, and then to be able to design a test to pick it up. So all that kind of research is what is going to be going on here ahead. And then also we're going to be building capacity of our lab workers and our medical practitioners in state, so that whenever another epidemic comes, we will be ready.
When completed, institutions like this will complement other health infrastructure and improve research on infectious diseases in Lagos.
Our commitment to build the Lagos State Infectious Disease Research Institute at Mainland Hospital Yaba will be our own modest contribution to strengthening infectious disease research and response capacity in readiness for any possible outbreak in the future.
The proposed 4-floor institute, which is being established to advance knowledge, research and evidence-based information on the identification, prevention, control and effective management of communicable and infectious diseases, will accommodate 5 major facilities, including research laboratories, genomics and reference clinics, teaching rooms, administrative offices and conference rooms.
Finally on the program, usually a sport reserved for the affluent suburbs of Zimbabwe's major cities, rugby is marking inroads into the countryside, where it offers a release from the woes of poverty, early marriages, not just that, unemployment, which have blighted the southern African country for decades. The sport is also bringing fame to members of the all-female Zimbabwe rugby team. Take a look.
Bridget Magasu trudges down a dusty pathway as she makes haste to attend a rugby practice session at Zimbabwe Primary School in Domboshava, a poor rural neighborhood 40 kilometers north of Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. The 20-year-old is the first to arrive for the training session, clutching a rugby ball in hand, while she patiently waits for other members of Zimbabwe's all-female rugby team. Team coach Takudzwa Ngirazi passes the ball around for practicing moves. Domboshava, a hub for transporting farm produce, has also become a hotspot for sex work.
I started off as a tag rugby club, then later developed into contact. The reason being, we wanted the girls to stay away from the streets. And looking at this place, it's a hotspot for sex work. So we try by all means to keep our girls away from that.
Zimbabwe's economy is weak. With the currency in free fall, a Zimbabwean $100 note is no longer enough to buy an egg. Jobs are scarce, pushing teenage girls into sex work, sometimes for as little as $2. Joining a rugby club hardly removes that economic imperative. However, organizers hope it will at least help tackle the boredom that prompts girls to hang out on the streets, where they might eventually be exposed to that world because they need money.
The mantra in the country these days is fighting drug abuse and substance abuse amongst the youths in our communities. So we feel that as Zimbiru Rugby, we're also playing our part to get these kids to be busy. If they're training 4 days a week and they have a game on a Saturday, it gives them very little time to think about anything else.
A few years ago, these young women, most from poor families, had never handled a rugby ball. Now the Zimbiru side, founded in 2016, are in a 15-team league. 4 of their players have been drafted into Zimbabwe's under-20 women's side, and a few have made the under-18 squad.
Ghost Team Zimbiru. Well, that's our program on Network Africa this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Minister Walker.